On a podcast, profiler Ann Burgess was asked if we were looking for a stalker. She paused before dropping a bombshell that completely shifted how we look at this entire case. She said, "I think this is much more of a personal crime, some grievance out there trying to play itself out. A personal vendetta, not money, not random violence, not a random burglar targeting a rich home. A grudge that existed long before January 31st. A slow burn designed to express intense rage." And then our behavioral analyst pointed out something else. She said money has to come in at some level, but she added a phrase almost entirely ignored by the media. She said, "Unless it was staged to throw everybody off." Staged. As investigators we know, she does not use that word lightly. Staging means deliberate misdirection. It means the suspect manufactured a fake financial kidnapping to throw us off the scent. The ransom notes the setup. The Bitcoin demands the cryptocurrency angles. All of it was likely pure theater designed to make us chase a financial ghost while the real motive remained hidden. If our profiler is right, and we must treat this as a clinical theory, not an established fact, then our entire investigation has been trapped inside a carefully constructed narrative from day one. We were chasing a trap designed to mislead us. So she told us where to look, who in her immediate orbit would suffer the absolute most from this loss. Not who wanted to hurt Nancy directly, but who wanted to use Nancy as a weapon to destroy someone else. An 84-year-old woman with a pacemaker, living alone in a quiet area, is not a logical target for advanced crypto kidnappers. Her daughter's wealth is entirely out of reach. You cannot squeeze an elderly mother to unlock her child's high-security financial accounts. It makes no sense. If the money trail leads nowhere, then, as investigators, we must ask, why target Nancy? Because of who she represents to another target. Savannah Guthrie sits in front of a camera every morning, speaking directly into the homes of millions of viewers. But behind that polished composure and 20 years of broadcast experience, she is harboring immense pain. She carries the heaviest burden imaginable. Her mother has vanished, and we still do not know where she is. Our profiler suspects the culprit targeted Savannah directly through her mother, calling it an incredibly cruel and deeply malicious act to commit. Cruel, not efficient, not calculated. This is not the clinical work of a professional financial criminal. It is the hallmark of a personal vendetta, a plot designed specifically to inflict the maximum psychological torment. The offender calculated exactly whose loss would shatter Savannah the most, and they chose her mother. And as our behavioral analyst noted, we can easily see who suffers most. She did not name the target. She did not have to. Every investigator in the room already knew the answer. Now let us examine how another forensic expert built upon this exact behavioral profile. Forensic psychologist Dr. Gary Burkado analyzed the case, expanding this spiderweb theory into a highly detailed, actionable, investigative framework. He believes if our primary suspect is caught, alive and in custody, he will trace the web straight back to the mastermind at the center. We are talking about a true puppet master pulling the strings from the shadows. If the motive is purely personal, the center of our investigation lies in the relationship surrounding Nancy, someone harboring a toxic grievance. An offender who surveilled her closely, learning her routine and her daily schedule, her vulnerabilities, her nightly habits, even knowing she removed her hearing aids before sleeping. They knew her home security cameras were not recording. That kind of intimate detail is not pulled off the dark web. It is not scraped from some Coinbase data breach or a celebrity net worth page. Our psychological profile highlights one more detail that locks these theories together. He observed the crime scene and the suspect's behavior point to someone comfortable with the entire operation. They were too calm, showing zero panic. Our analysis of the security footage reveals they feared no capture. She noted the suspect showed an eerie, cold composure under pressure. These behavioral patterns point to two possibilities: Either the killer planned this out of a deeply personal vendetta, or they were executing precise instructions with absolute confidence in their success. Coke. When we look at that footage, that level of composure at 2 a.m. on a dark porch does not suggest a crime of random opportunity. It reveals absolute certainty, a complete conviction that their design was flawless, certainty that their intelligence was dead accurate. They knew exactly when and where to strike, because someone on the inside had guaranteed their target would be there. Now let us look at the final, most chilling assessment from our profiling colleague. The host of the special broadcast perfectly captured the dark theory building in our minds. He asked if the suspect at the door was already dead, eliminated by his own employer. The analyst agreed instantly. It was a professional cleanup planned to leave 0 loose ends. They executed it flawlessly. We are looking at an unprecedented level of criminal organization, a type of cold case we have never encountered before. Think about that. After 50 years of tracking the nation's most complex serial killers, our lead profiler warns us this is completely new territory. Not just an unusual crime, but a terrifying new operational structure. The intelligence gathering, the cold execution, and the systematic erasure of physical evidence are highly sophisticated. It is a blueprint that even veteran detectives and behavioral scientists have never seen combined so effectively. Orchestrated so perfectly that the suspect, despite having his face and unique tattoo caught on security footage, remains completely unidentified after more than 100 days. Furthermore, the masterminds operating above this street-level asset have left absolutely 0 trace for federal investigators to exploit. And if that suspect has been silenced, a brutal reality we often see in highly organized syndicates, then the forensic trail leading from that doorstep to the real mastermind has been permanently severed, leaving us with one less witness to interrogate, one less path to the center of the web. There is another psychological detail our colleague highlighted that the media ignored. The killer is likely watching this coverage closely, studying every development and feeding on the community's mounting fear and anxiety. They are feeding their ego, reading every news report and analyzing every video update we post online, carefully measuring how close my team is getting to them, harboring secrets only they and the victim share. Picture them sitting in the dark, watching the morning news anchors plead for information, observing a desperate family plead for their missing mother, dissecting our expert profiles and media theories while knowing exactly what they did and where Nancy is hidden, knowing the true psychological motive behind this horror. That reality should terrify us all, because the breakthrough we need is not waiting inside a sterile forensics lab. It will not be found in some DNA bank or on a retail store receipt. The answer is locked inside a spectator who is playing a game with us. Let's address our biggest investigative blind spot. The Bureau must start sharing their intelligence files with the public. Keeping vital evidence locked away is a massive tactical error when we desperately need the community's eyes and ears to blow this investigation wide open. Shockingly, investigators handed the primary crime scene back to the family almost immediately. Other prominent forensic experts have voiced the exact same concerns about this critical misstep. Our colleagues warn that crucial physical evidence was likely contaminated or destroyed by relinquishing control of the home so quickly. We lost precious time clearing relatives who had already compromised a scene where every trace element could have solved the mystery. Microscopic fibers, fragile biological matter that decays rapidly, was our best shot at identifying this killer. This is not about assigning blame or accusing our fellow agencies of incompetence. It is about exposing the systemic gaps that are stalling this investigation. Gaps that any seasoned detective knows can sink a prosecution, and the baffling reasons behind these police procedural failures. We need to trust the community with key facts so they can assist us. There are specific files sitting on my desk right now that would break this case if exposed to the light. distinct physical traits, behavioral tics, key markers that would force a close associate to finally realize they are living with a monster. In my experience, these complex investigations rarely crack through a perfect laboratory match or a sudden confession from an accomplice. They break when an ordinary citizen, perhaps a suspicious neighbor, connects the dots. We are waiting for that one person, a coworker, a relative, or an old friend, to spot a single detail and finally pick up the phone. But that breakthrough requires information in the public domain. And my colleague Dr. Burgess insists the Bureau is holding back critical files. She is demanding they release them. Let us assemble the pieces of Burgess's profiling together. We must analyze the suspect's behavioral evidence very carefully. She dissected how he stood at that threshold, his movements, his spatial interactions, and reached a chilling conclusion: this was calculated. It was highly intentional. The predator expected that door to open from within. This was deeply personal, fueled by a dark grievance. And what if Nancy Guthrie was never the real target? The actual target is likely someone whose suffering would be absolute upon Nancy's death. The staging of a robbery was a classic misdirection, but something went wrong inside that home. The man on the porch might already be dead silence to protect the mastermind. The architect of this crime is watching us right now. Yet the Bureau is withholding the very clues that could break this open. These psychological insights come directly from the legendary profiler who once sat face-to-face with Ted Bundy, the pioneer who shaped modern behavioral analysis, dedicating 50 years to mapping the minds of humanity's worst predators. We are not looking at some amateur internet theory here. This is clinical forensic science honed over 50 years applied to one victim, yet not a single network has connected these dots for the public. To show how it actually builds. In our investigation of Nancy Guthrie, we found absolutely nothing in her background to make her a primary target. She simply lacked the wealth that draws professional thieves. She possessed no public profile, no platform to generate dangerous enemies. She was just an 84-year-old woman who watched church services on Sunday mornings with a small group of close friends. Someone who loved family dinners, took her evening medication, removed her hearing aids, and fell asleep, believing her home was a sanctuary. From an analytical standpoint, she was targeted for what she symbolized to someone else. And that other person, the surrogate target, the actual focus of this toxic, deep-seated psychological resentment, has been broadcasting on national television every morning since March 5th, 2026. Ever since Savannah Guthrie returned to the air, she has begged the public not to stop searching, desperately clinging to the belief that her mother is still alive. Her poise under the glaring studio lights is almost unnatural, hiding an agonizing psychological burden that would break most people. Dr. Burgess described this act as deeply malicious, angry, and cruel. That is the clinical assessment of an expert who has cataloged human cruelty for 50 years, concluding that the underlying psychological motive here is not complex. It is just pure, vindictive, personal malice. Not sophisticated, not financially driven, not a professional hit. Just cruel. Someone weaponized an 84-year-old mother to destroy her daughter. That is the profiler's conclusion. Regardless of whether the robbery was real or a setup, our behavioral analysis points to something intensely personal. This is a blood feud. A message sent directly to a woman who must host a national broadcast every morning pretending to be fine while dying inside. This is the psychological dark core we are desperately trying to map. This is the face that the DNA at Quantico will eventually unmask. That is what 50,000 tips, 10,000 hours of video footage, genetic genealogy, and cryptoforensics are aiming to expose. We must know who went to that door, who pulled the strings, and why. If you know anything, call 1-800-KLFBI. The $1.2 million reward remains unclaimed. The person who holds the key already knows it. Let's look closely at the surveillance footage one more time together. Forget what everyone else is looking at. Forget the branch stuffed in front of the lens or the flashlight clamped between his teeth. Do not focus on the gloved hand covering the lens. Watch his entry phase. He walks right up to the front door. He stands there, waiting. He makes no attempt to force entry. He does not peer into windows. He seeks no alternative access point. He just stands at the front door of an 84-year-old woman at 2 a.m, waiting. As investigators, we must ask why. If your objective is a home invasion, you do not linger on the front porch. You do not ring the bell or stand in plain view of a camera letting it capture your face before you finally cover the lens. You slip around the back. You find an open window. You act like a seasoned offender trying to bypass detection. This subject did none of that. He marched directly to the front entrance and just stood there. This week, my colleague, Dr. Ann Burgess, who literally architected the Bureau's profiling division, raised these exact warnings. The legendary mind who inspired Netflix's hit series Mindhunter, a woman who spent 50 years decoding the worst human impulses, examined this footage. She just exposed a dark reality that no other investigator has dared to address on camera. She analyzed the footage and concluded the killer wanted Nancy to open the door voluntarily. He was waiting for her to let him in. If that single psychological insight is correct, then everything you and I think we know about this killer's identity and motive completely shatters. That is the breakthrough we are analyzing today, and it is easily the most critical development in weeks. But before we dig deeper, we must examine who Dr. Ann Burgess really is. Forget her titles and resume, look at her actual work. In 1977, a young FBI agent named Robert Ressler asked Burgess for help with an unprecedented mission. He wanted to interview captured serial killers, not to prosecute them, but to understand their minds, how they selected prey, and how they hunted. They needed to unpack crimes that left detectives baffled. Burgess agreed, joining Ressler and John Douglas, the actual legendary profiler, who inspired the lead character in Mindhunter. Together they drove across the country, sitting eye to eye with the most dangerous predators inside American prisons. Men like Ed Kemper, Ted Bundy, and John Wayne Gacy. They asked questions no one dared to ask. They listened to horrific details that would make most people physically sick. Out of those grim conversations, they built modern criminal profiling, the exact behavioral science the FBI relies on today. It is the clinical methodology that helps us decode, locate, and convict killers who would otherwise remain completely invisible. Burgess literally built that framework. She is not some talking head analyzing true crime. She is the pioneer who invented the science we use to solve it. When she evaluates the behavioral evidence in a case, she is not guessing. She is applying 50 years of direct experience with the most sophisticated criminal minds this country has ever produced. So when she sat down for her interview on News Nation in April 2026, and then analyzed the Nancy Guthrie case for their May documentary, every word she uttered carried the immense psychological weight of her half-century career. When she says this offender wanted that door opened voluntarily, it demands our attention. That is not internet speculation from armchair detectives. That is a disciplined diagnostic assessment from a woman who has spent 50 years decoding exactly this type of predatory behavior. Let us look at the evidence she evaluated. We start with the established timeline. The front doorbell camera is disabled at 1:47 a.m. At 2:12, a motion sensor triggers detecting movement near the house. Nancy Guthrie's pacemaker disconnects from her phone at 2:28. Exactly 41 minutes from camera blackouts to pacemaker silence. And inside that gap, between 2:12 and 2:28, lies an unexplained 16-minute window. When Burgess examined the recovered security footage released by the FBI, showing the masked figure standing at the front door, she made an observation that stopped us cold. She concluded, "I believe something went very wrong inside that home because we know there was blood." Think about that phrase, "very wrong." She is not talking about an offender getting caught. She means a deviation from script when violence occurs that the offender did not plan. But we know blood was found right outside on Nancy Guthrie's front porch, confirmed by Pima County Sheriff Chris Nanos as a direct DNA match to Nancy, splattered directly across the exterior stone steps. But Burgess pointed to a forensic detail that almost no media coverage has addressed. She asked where the blood trail leads. It does not. It simply vanishes. And so does she. We found no secondary blood trail leaving the crime scene. There is zero physical evidence showing which direction Nancy was moved after she bled on those stone steps. The droplets pool, they stop, and she is gone. What does a clinical profiler read in that silence? She reads it as proof that the physical crisis occurred right during the abduction process, not after. Before she left. The physical confrontation took place right there on or near those steps, and the clean perimeter suggests she was not walking when she left the property. She was carried away. Former FBI profiler Jim Clemente analyzed this blood evidence independently and reached the exact same behavioral conclusion. He believes that where the blood stops, Nancy was lifted and carried to a getaway vehicle, likely unconscious. By the time that cardiac pacemaker went silent at 2:28, Nancy was not walking. She was not being led. She was already being transported, and the assault that drew blood happened before that transport even began. Now let us re-examine that front door. Here is Burgess's profile of the suspect's behavior at the threshold. And here is why this psychological detail matters more than anything else we have uncovered. She says this was absolutely not random behavior. When we analyze this footage, one thing is clear: this subject had a purpose that instantly eliminates an entire category of suspect. Random criminals do not drive to an exact house in a quiet neighborhood carrying a specific weapon and a targeted backpack. They do not disable a designated camera feed at an exact moment and then just stand there waiting. This individual had a clear mission, a reason, and a destination. My colleague Ann Burgess noted something deeper. The suspect's behavior suggests he wanted his victim to open the door, voluntarily avoiding forced entry. She pointed out that if someone actually intends to break in, there are much simpler methods. Let that sink in for a moment. If the goal was simple home invasion, there are far easier ways. He was not trying to breach the house. He was waiting to be invited in. Former FBI agent Chris Gruing tracked the same behavioral cues and arrived at the exact same conclusion. Gruing raised critical questions. Did the suspect ring the bell? Was he actively trying to lure Nancy out to that porch? Was he intentionally hiding from the camera lens, hoping she would open the door in confusion without seeing who was there? If that is the case, then this suspect had zero interest in a standard burglary. This was highly personal, driven by a specific grievance. Former FBI criminal profiler Dr. Mary Ellen Ull observed the exact same patterns when analyzing the footage on another broadcast. She noted how remarkably comfortable the suspect looked standing on that porch, almost as if he had stood there before. His body language simply did not match someone operating in unfamiliar territory. 3 expert investigators, 3 independent profiles, all pointing to the exact same behavioral signature. This man had been to this house before. He confidently expected her to open that door. This was not a random drifter seizing a sudden opportunity. This was someone or an asset sent by someone who knew exactly where they were going and expected entry. Now let's look at the one crucial detail that the media completely missed.